The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ask for Candy, 101 ways to make your love and your life sweeter. Who I am Candace, HarperLoveCoach.com, honey. I teach and inspire audacious intimacy to powerful, professional, grown women who want real relationships and seductive singlehoods. And I always say that dating and relationships can be hard, but love is always easy. And you are listening to Armed Radio on maybe your smart device on the TuneIn app, or maybe you're in the garden on armedradioglobal.com. We're also now available on iHeartRadio, so I believe that if you have an Alexa, you can ask for candy. Maybe you're joining us live here on the Facebook, and you know that if you are joining us live on Facebook, you got to talk to us, you got to comment, you got to let us know you're here, tell us what you're thinking, and ask all kinds of questions. And you have to join the Creative Love Collective and Armed Radio Group News. Now, if you're shy and you don't want to ask questions in the live comments and you don't want to call our number, 1-800-508-5431, you can also email me at askforcandypodcast@gmail.com. And like I said, I'm Candace Harper, Love Coach, and my talent is conversation, my passion is personal growth, and my purpose is to teach and inspire radical self-acceptance in myself and in others so that we can all have the best possible love life. And what this show is about? Each week, we have very lively conversations about different topics relating to love and relationships. Sometimes we bring on special guests or games and activities, and always we get a chance to laugh or cry or maybe just learn something new. And that is why this is a conversation, honey. We're not here to hand down a bunch of dating rules or relationship rules or rights and wrongs. We're not here to shame your love situation because, you know, we've done our dirt. And our intention is to create audacious intimacy, seductive singlehood, and healthy relationships. And tonight's show, we are wrapping up our ongoing series. It was such a sexy, sexy summer. Our ongoing series where I partnered with other love coaches, relationship experts, and opinionated people about sex and intimacy. And this is the last episode of the summer of sexploration, everybody. The summer was fast. And it was sexy, but stick around with us because next Monday we're going to be talking about new beginnings and falling in love. But the sexy times aren't over yet. Tonight's show the goal is to have a shame-releasing conversation about, you know, where we want to feel support and similarity and be a community around our fetishes and our kinks. And so tonight I brought on a very, very special guest. Her name is Dr. Eva Burnett, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist in Florida, and she's the founder of Couples Seeking Solutions and Retreats. She specializes in individual and couples therapy. Dr. Eva is a member of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy and Broward Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. Since 2005, she's been enhancing couples' lives throughout the United States by providing them with sexual education and the ability to reconnect, revitalize, and ignite the passion within their relationships. We love that, don't we? She also leads a Facebook group entitled Relationship Revolutionaries, a tribe where couples thrive, and hosts a fantastic podcast entitled Taboo Talk, which is perfect because that's what we're having tonight. Welcome, Dr. Eva.
Thank you so much, Candace. I love being here with you, and I love your energy. It's
great. Thank you. We got to bring the noise, honey, especially when we're having, right? Especially when we're having Taboo Talk. So I wanted to have, you and I got to talk a little bit. I really wanted to have this conversation as sort of our wrap up because the whole summer has been about, releasing shame around sex and, getting love life. And I think one of those things is, when we have our different, little kinks and predilections and things about us that sometimes we think have to be secret. We're talking about, like, the stuff that consenting adults like to do, right? So tonight, I really wanted to delve into what some of the kinks and fetishes are, so we can maybe help some people identify some things they were wondering about, and also maybe talk a little bit about the psychological, origins and things. I feel like that's something you could really help us dig deep into, good. And just sort of have some peaceful, loving conversation about it.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. We're gonna have the people on the Facebook Live are slowly trickling in, so
Wonderful.
You guys know that you can talk to us and all of that stuff. So, Dr. Eva, tell me a little bit more about yourself as far as getting related with the audience. I gave some of your credentials, but talk a little bit about your personal experience, just as a relationship therapist, and who you are as a person.
Yeah, thank you. So I started my adventure out in 2005, actually, when I first became a Passion Parties consultant. And if anybody's ever been to a passion party in here, go ahead and put a smiley face, right? Because they're a lot of fun. And that's what I did for the first 8 years in my 20s. I was making money. I was going to school. And while I was going through that experience, I realized while I was at the parties, having fun with the ladies, educating them, entertaining them, and really getting to a place where we're all laughing in the room, what would happen when I get into the ordering room is they would sit down with me and they would start telling me about their relationship issues, and they would start telling me about their kinks or their fetishes and how they're really not getting their needs met in their relationship. And so I've heard this over and over and over again, Candace. And so what I decided to do is get my master's and my PhD, because at the time I thought to myself, I don't know how to help these people. I don't know how to help these wonderful ladies. Yeah. All I know how to do is, at the time, all I knew how to do is I taught them about sexual education. We talked about shame. We talked about breaking through sexual blocks. We talked about lubricants and vibrators and all that fun stuff too, of course.
Yeah.
Things that go buzz in the nighttime. We had a good time. Exactly. Yeah. So we got down and we had fun. And I really enjoyed the ladies, but it really was like the end of my career. And because I wanted to start a practice. I wanted to help couples on an internal level, not just topical, not just giving them little lubricants and toys and fun things to do in the bedroom, but to really help them deep down. So I went in to get my master's, my PhD, graduated a couple years ago, but I've been in practice now for about 8 years. And I love it. I'm in a private practice. I work with couples, and I help couples get to a place where they're thriving in their relationship, not just surviving, not just a good relationship, not even just a great relationship, like a thriving relationship. And, it's great. We have a 92% success rate at the practice, which is awesome, especially since the divorce rate still is 52%. So We're doing some good work in the world,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're here, right? To have healthy partnerships and be supported and all of that good stuff. And I actually think, even though sometimes a lot of people think that it's not that important, I think that our physical, sexual connection, the intimacy thing is like the sort of the foundation, right? In a lot of ways, like how we connect with each other.
Absolutely.
What would you say about that?
Yeah, I agree. Like a couple of years ago, I did a lot of deep sexual work on myself too, right? Because in this work, you have to do sexual work and you have to figure out what's going on with you. What are your biases? What are your prejudices? What is going on with you sexually? And I never, thank the Lord, I never had any, abuse growing up or anything like that sexually to break through. But in society, our culture really puts a lot of shame and guilt on both men and women in the sexual realm. Yeah. And so what I've learned is in that context, when they're talking about guilt, we're talking about anxiety, and we're talking about sexual blocks, I've learned that you have to work through that. So I did that for myself about a couple years back. And it's funny because I have a funny story. I'll share real quick with you. Yeah, I was on a podcast with Jen and Ben Rode, right? And they said to me, they're sexual explosive healers, by the way. That's what they did for 6 years.
Sexual explosive?
Yeah, they're the highest paid sexual coaches in the world. Okay. So I was on the podcast with them, and I said to them, so how often do you guys have sex, right? And they're like, well, we have sex twice a day. And I'm like, my jaw dropped. I was like, because at the time I was going through my dissertation. I was getting my doctorate. I was in my head, not in my body, right? And my husband and I were making love twice a month, maybe, Yeah, so I was like, two times a day.
Like,
where do you find the time? Where do you find the time? And so I decided, I left the podcast. It was so funny, Candace. I left the podcast and I said, Paul, who you guys are going to meet in just a second, he's going to come on and talk about our little sensual restraint experience with Mia Cara. But I said, Paul, if Jen and Ben can do it, we can do it, you know? Yeah. And so we kind of experimented and we ended up making love every day for like 3 months. Oh, wow. And my husband was in his glory. He was like, hallelujah, you know? But I learned a lot about myself. Yeah. When I was going through that process, like I learned that I make excuses. I learned that I had my own sexual shame. I learned that I actually had a little bit of sexual guilt, and I'm like, where is this coming from, right? Yeah. And the thing that I've learned as I've been working with couples and things like that since many, many years ago, I learned that we all have blocks. We all have blocks, and we also always have curiosities about the unknown, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, you know, that's my experience, you know, working through sexual blocks and really getting to a place where you can make love with your partner. If not every day, every other day, you know, it's really important because I noticed that once I did start making love to my husband, I actually really yearn for it the next day. Because the more sex you have, the more you want sex, right? Yeah. So it was an interesting experiment. And so we've actually been going through for the past couple of years now like that. So it's been good.
I love that. That's fantastic. And I love something you said about curiosities, because that's one of my things. I mean, there's a lot of things out there, especially when I was reading through this list, that are like, you know, obviously possible and available to people. But I'm like, I can see myself finding them titillating if someone else is doing them.
Exactly.
I want to delve into that too, that idea of like, I don't know if you want to call it voyeurism or whatever, that it's maybe like some of the things that we ourselves wouldn't try look even more enticing because they're, you know, someone else's.
Well, there's always curiosities, right? There's always curiosities and there's always fantasy. Fantasy is amazing. You never want to take the fantasy away. That doesn't mean you have to do it, but you can still fantasize about it. You can still keep it in your mind. It's very erotic to keep things like that in your mind, even if you don't want to bring them into reality. You know?
No, that totally makes sense. Are you ready to delve into the list? I want to say hi to some of the people that have come in. Rob came in, Angela, Michael's here. I see Beth and Mary Beth and Montgomery and Lee. Lee comes in. He's one of my regulars. He's an unofficial co-host. Hi, Lee. Hopefully you guys will engage with us and you'll have questions as we go along, because we have Dr. Eva here. We have to make the most of our time and get some good information. So should we jump in? Should we
let's do it.
Let's bring it. Do you want to bring Paul in too? Let's bring Paul in to say hi.
You want to bring Paul in? All right.
Yeah.
You guys all want to meet my husband.
Right?
Hi, everybody.
Come on in. Right. Let them set up their earphones. So
there we go. I think I got you.
So the reason I wanted to bring Paul in early is because one of the things, you know, we had talked about, you're going to talk about, is going to come up like very early on the list. But we got to get past the first one. So Angie Jones of Glamour Magazine broke like fetishism and things like that down and kink down into an A to Z list. I don't think we're going to get through the whole alphabet tonight.
Yeah, we might. Right? Who knows?
We might. We're going to try. Some of the things I feel like they're kind of commonly known, but we want to delve into the ones that are like, you know, really sound really interesting, that, you know, might give us a little fodder for thought. So the first one, which I thought was interesting, is A for age play. And she talks about
age play. Interesting.
Right? Okay. And she talks about it's a form of role play where one or both of the partners pretend to be an age other than their own. Like it's like she's like, a common example is daddy, dominant, baby, girl. If you're calling someone daddy in bed, which that's actually something that I do.
Yeah.
I love that. Like,
it's actually really common.
Yeah.
It's actually really common to be playful in that regard. Yeah.
Lots of times things come out and you aren't expecting it.
Right.
I always tell her my inner Luke Cage comes out. I'm like, oh my God, what did I just say?
But what do you think about like the whole age play? Like, do you think that it has some sort of like basis in? I mean, I get it that there's a light version of it, and then there's like people actually really want to fully role play it. Do you think that there's some sort of like psychological origin, some emotional like Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think people can be playful with it and just use it as a place of discovery, and it's fine to do role play, right? But there are some that dabble a little bit more seriously in that, you know, in terms of BDSM and so forth, you know. And so the daddy role, often in my couples, they actually play out the daddy role as a place of dominance in the relationship. So they're kind of playing around with the patriarchal, you know, metaphor sexually in the relationship. And people really enjoy that. I mean, I have a lot of couples that do that, and they come in and they talk to me openly about it. And, you know, the interesting part for me as a clinician in terms of understanding that is kind of understanding the psychological aspects of that. And a lot of times, even though there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, and I want to be clear that this is not a conversation about shame. It's actually a conversation about normalizing. Yeah. But I wanted to say that, you know, oftentimes when we grow up, with our same sex or opposite sex parent, we might have a great relationship, not so a great relationship with that person. And so what happens is we kind of seek approval in the partners that we date. And so a lot of times people can, exploit that in their sexuality and really get their needs met and finally get that approval that they never really got from their parents or a boyfriend or experience that they had in their previous life. So that's just one way of looking at it, you know?
And I could imagine, and you can tell me if this is true or not, I mean, I would imagine that it's kind of a healthy way to sort of, I mean, two consenting adults, it's kind of a healthy way to sort of play that out, right? Do you think that that's...
I agree. Yeah, I think it's healthy. I think it's good as long as both people are consenting, as long as both people are enjoying it, and as long as both people feel safe, you know, as long as those three things are accounted for in any sexual experience, doesn't matter what it is, I say go for it.
Right?
You know, have fun.
I love it. Beth, who's watching on the Facebook, she says, how long have they been married? They are adorable. She's in love with you guys.
10 years, baby.
We've been together 10 years, married
10
6.
years. Oh, I love it. I know Beth personally. She also has a very sweet husband, and they're very cute, too.
Thanks, honey.
Thank you, Beth.
Right. So this next one is the one I really want to jump into because Dr. Eva, you and I touched on this a little bit in our pre-interview. So B is for bondage. And I know that you guys have a little bit of an experience you want to talk about.
That's why I had my husband come on. You know, Beth, if you think we're cute now, we might get a little naughty.
It might be a different type of video, you know.
Especially with this one over here. But you know, the thing is that, you know, in all seriousness, and then we can have some fun with it. I went out to Costa Rica, and I actually went to Jen and Ben's place. It's funny that I brought them up in the podcast, but I actually did a retreat there, and I was the guest speaker, and I was an attendee. And one of the other teachers, her name is Mia Cara. And I fell in love with her right away. We instantly had a connection. I'm talking about friendship here, people, by the way. Let's be clear. She became a very good friend really quickly. But what she taught was the art of sensual restraint. And she's very clear not to call it bondage, believe it or not.
Really?
Which is really interesting. Yeah, because there's a whole community of people that participate in bondage. And a lot of them get offended when it's not the exact kind of bondage that they participate in, right? There's built-in communities in the bondage community. So what her specialty is the art of sensual restraint. And I wish she was here. We'll do another one with her, you know?
Absolutely. We'll have both you on.
Yeah. So basically what she did is she brought out, well, first of all, I can tell you that my bias going into it was what's going to happen because I've never done anything like this before. It was fully clothed. It was a fully clothed exercise. Okay. No weird stuff going on. No threesome stuff or anything like that. I think that would be beyond my comfort zone. Maybe in 50 years and I don't care anymore. But anyways, so we were going into this experience and it's at nighttime, and so it was from 6 to 10 o'clock at night. And she set the stage, she did the pillows, she got the candles, and what she did is she actually, and we'll go through this slowly because it was a really cool experience. She had the men set the stage or the container for the women, and everyone was married, by the way, right? Everyone was married, all married couples, and there was only 3 that participated in this exchange, okay? So we basically, all the men went in and they got ready. If you want to talk about that first, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, we learned how to set up the environment.
Yeah.
That was the main thing that I learned from doing that is that the environment is really, really important whenever you're going to introduce something new. Because before, we'd gone to the store and you're like, okay, we'll buy rope, and you go up to the thing and it's like buy it by the foot, and you're like, okay, how many feet do we need? How many pieces do I need? You have no idea what you're doing. And so, all of it was about learning how to set up the environment to introduce the rope into your experience. Yeah. And so we helped her set up the space and see the difference in the space before just going into your bedroom like it normally looks. And then also taking the time.
Can I ask you this, Paul? When you say set up the environment, like what specific, like you don't have to go into like the exact, but like.
No, I can totally go into it for you.
Was it pillows? Was it like.
Well, it was also, it's the pillows, but you're looking at like texture. So, bedding and pillows and things like that. You're looking at the colors and the texture of it, but then also with your candles, you wanted them to be in the corners of the room. So you didn't want them to be like a certain that was the certain spot that they worked the best. So each corner of the room you had the candles set up, and then also if you had flat spaces, on tabletops you actually would take your lights that you have next to your bed off of your nightstand and put candles there.
No fluorescent light.
No fluorescent light. Just making sure that the environment, and then the way that you set up your music, everything like that, it makes it so whenever you're trying to introduce something new, it wasn't like a scary thing that you're introduced, like we're just going to go in here and do this. You're actually setting up the space to like feel comfortable and feel like you're okay and willing to accept and learn something new.
I love how like with the promise of sex, all these men turn into like decorators.
Well, I definitely did, but it's not even always about sex, because some of the things that she was teaching, are just about touch. So you're in a position that isn't actually you aren't going to be able to have sex. You can't be hogtied and have sex.
Right, that's true.
That's different things that we were learning. It was more just about the touch and that kind of stuff, and setting the stage. And the thing that I really loved about it was not only just learning the environment, but learning how to introduce it and use this. So how you're getting the rope out and running it through your hands for people that are watching, and not just like, okay, I'm going to tie you up. You're
taking your time.
You're taking your time. You're rubbing the rope along her skin really slowly, and making sure that you're connecting, like looking at her in the eyes, and talking to her while you're
talk about intimacy. And I was like,
it was such a different experience, because like I said before, when we went to the store and bought something, it was like, okay, I don't like this. This is weird. I don't want to do this.
If you don't mind me saying, Paul,
go right ahead.
I wanted to say too that the most important thing for me as a woman is the energy of the exchange, and the energy and the intensity of the connection between my husband and I. That's what does it for me. So she taught the men how to stand in their masculine, and I have never seen my husband do this ever. I was like, okay, that's awesome.
Like that's
but she
a lot of times I'm scared I'm going to hurt her.
Right.
It's not like standing in your full masculine power whenever you're doing something. I'm not the way, and also it wasn't doing it. It was like maybe when I'm pulling the knot, and I'm the way that I pull it and look at her at the same time, and the force and the intention that I was doing it with. So it made it completely different how I was presenting it.
Exactly.
To her.
It's all about the presentation.
And the presentation
it also sounds like what you created is like presence in the moment too.
Presence,
right?
100%.
Like, be with me. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, when she's in this dynamic, she doesn't let any of the men go to the bathroom. She's like, go to the bathroom before, because
everybody.
This is really important. If you're ever going to do any type of sensual restraint, you know, because basically, let's say you restrain the arms, you know, or the wrists. You don't want to leave the woman or the man, right? Depending on which way you're playing with this rope. You don't want to leave them feeling abandoned or disconnected from you at all during this experience. So everything is about setting the stage and creating a level of safety and connection from the beginning to the end, believe it or not, which is super intense and I've never experienced. So it's really less about the rope and less about the bondage and more about the energy exchange and doing something different. Yeah,
that was wonderful. It was totally different for me. Also,
what's interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say what's interesting that's coming up for me as, you know, when you're talking about it too, is that I think, and just from my own past experiences and dealing with clients and stuff, a big thing that always comes up is emotional safety. And I think that what you're talking about too is such a metaphor. It's like in reality, like the physical demonstration of emotional safety.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
When I was there at the Costa Rica retreat for couples, I was teaching about communication and intimacy because that's one of my specialties, right? Yeah. And it was so cool to see the metaphor and the parallel between what I did on a mind level and a connection level with the couples and what she did on a body level. It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact thing. So I actually invited her out to be at my couples retreats in South Florida and Costa Rica because I loved her so much. Yeah. And I really want couples to experience this. Even if they feel like they have a bias or something like that, you know, just try it one time. And it's not something you have to do all the time, but it really actually builds intimacy and connection through the body, not just through communication. Yeah. And I think
that's like with any growth, I always say, I think it's so important if you can have some sort of physical demonstration of what you're emoting, what you're learning emotionally, it really puts it in your system rather than just knowing it and not doing it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Actually, it's funny because I've always felt very close intimately wise, but I believe that it actually up-leveled our connection.
I would it really did, because it was something that we'd never experienced before, going to that place. We had done plenty of other things, obviously, because she worked in passion parties whenever I met her. It has not sucked to be me for the past 10 years, that's for sure. That's awesome. But, you know, it was a completely different experience doing that in the way that we did, because whenever we started to connect and look at each other, it really wasn't, like she said, it wasn't about the rope. Also, the other thing I was going to say, the rope that she used was completely different than what you would see, like when you go to an adult store. So it was actually a rope from like Home Depot. It was very soft. It was really soft white rope instead of like the hemp rope that they have at...
You should go get it, baby, so we can show them.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. I'll do that whenever you want me to. And so it was just much different as far as how it felt on her skin and my skin whenever it was used on me. And so you didn't feel like you were getting scared of being restrained. Because, you know, a lot of times I think that's what somebody might feel whenever they're starting to try this. You'll be a little intimidated or scared. Like, okay, what am I doing? What's going on? That kind of stuff.
Like if it's a little abrasive or something like that.
Like handcuffs. You know, a lot of people use handcuffs, and it's nothing like handcuffs. I mean, it's actually much safer. It's warmer. It's more sultry of an experience. So highly recommend it for sure.
Well, tell me now. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say, Paul?
Well, I was going to say that the other thing that I noticed, too, is whenever I lost focus and started trying to figure out how to tie the knot correctly, like she was showing me, and then I wasn't, you know, looking at her or paying attention to the connection that we'd already had, then it would start to go away, and they'd be like, oh. And then she would tell us it doesn't really matter if the knot is tied exactly correct the way that it was supposed to be that I showed you. It's all about the energy that you created and the container, the energy and the connection that you had there with each other, and not that. But I would notice that just for people that are listening whenever they're trying it. You know, if I stopped paying attention and started paying attention to making sure I tied it correctly, you know, then
I was lost.
Then it would be lost because, you know, she wouldn't be as into it, and she would start to, you know, fade away from wanting to, you know, participate in it. Like, okay, I'm ready to. I'm not ready. I'm ready for you to untie me now, because that kind of thing. If you weren't paying attention to the actual connection the whole time. and not really paying attention to the ties and stuff.
You mentioned that you both got a chance to tie each other, or was it?
No, it was just man to woman this time.
Okay.
But, it can go both ways. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can experiment with this. We're babies, we're practically virgins when it comes to this kind of thing. But it was just really something that we wanted to come online and talk about with couples because, one, I think it's really important for people to experience safety on a body level. And if it's not just for sexuality, or titillation rather, but more for the connection for me and more for couples to experience the intimacy of that kind of dynamic in the bedroom. It really sets up the polarity also of the masculine and feminine. And I find that women like to be taken care of during sex. They like to be held. They like it. Yes.
The closeness was amazing.
Yes. And men like to be in their masculine. Oftentimes women are emasculating women in the bedroom. They're emasculating women in their lives because women have to play so many different roles. It's not our fault, right? We're not doing it on purpose. But sometimes men feel a little emasculated. And so in the bedroom, it's a great opportunity for men to take the reins back, and be like, let's participate and have some fun with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Emasculating and multitasking. I feel like multitasking is a big, like thinking about what needs to be done through the course of the day, thinking about what needs to be done the next day, not being present in the moment.
That was the best part about it.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
And she actually did some intimacy falls. She actually had me fall into my husband and lose complete body control to start as a way to set up the safety in the connection. And also, it was a way. I love this. I love the smile in both of their faces. You can, it was great.
Yeah. We should read that for the people who are just on audio. So Lee says, "I love the smile on both their faces as they talk about this. You can tell it was a great experience." And what else for both of them? I love that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Go ahead. Lee. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it, buddy.
Right. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that our audio people get to hear everything too. But go ahead.
No, it's really important, I think, for people to experience different things, because Paul and I, like he said, we were in passion parties for back in the day, but, toys and things like that have never really been 100% my thing, And for me, like I said, it was more about energy. It was more about the connection with him. And so this really set the stage. So I do recommend people practicing the art of sensual restraint, but again, it's about the eye contact, it's about setting up the room, it's about creating safety, and it's about holding yourself in your masculine. And it was interesting too, because she taught, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, right? But Mia taught Paul how to stand in his masculine by thinking about the anger, but not experiencing anger. So so think about being angry. What happens when you're angry? You're really centered, you're focused, and you're in that position of, I got this under control type thing, right?
I got to take control of it.
I'm going to take control of it, right? So she thought, so the idea of thinking about anger, not as the emotion, but as the body stance is one of the ways that men can practice standing in their masculine, their protective energy.
It was a really good way to ground all your power, because when she was doing the fall into you, you're basically like when she shows when you're not doing that, you're going to fall backwards. And so whenever you actually take the time to, stand in your ground and really, feel all of your power, and, you can think of it like anger or just any way as far as putting your power in, into your stance and feeling that and actually being kind of aware and deliberate about it.
Right.
And so then whenever she would fall against me, there was no movement of my body. And there wasn't really any movement in mine to begin with, but whenever I started doing that, it was even less movement. But also, it's not just that, because you're also being soft up top for when she fell into you.
So it's like a protective softness.
I'm a big guy, so whenever she would do it at first, it's just but then you'd fall and it'd be bah! It'd be hard. It wouldn't be, something soft that she would feel. Like I was actually catching her and being sensual, like she said. So doing that, but grounding in your power and having your full, power there, it made it to where you could soften up your chest area, but you still weren't going to move any. Because when your husband or your partner looks at you and says, sit down now,
or whatever or something. I mean, in that intensity, you're kind of like, okay, you know, because a lot of times women, when we do these types of things, especially when we're new to it, we giggle, we laugh, we're like being coy about it, you know, or don't. And it's, I mean, if you're new, if you're experienced, then that's a whole different story, you know, because you've already developed your body experience. But what she said, Mia talked about the idea of don't allow your lady to throw you off. If she giggles, if
don't
she
start
laughs,
giggling.
you know, yeah, right. Just be present with her and bring her back into focus. And so that's been a great experience just in regular sexual experience, you know?
Yeah. See, the thing about that, and I feel like for some people this is triggering. For me personally, I kind of have this because I'm, you know, what they consider a very powerful, independent woman, all of that stuff. And that has come up in my relationships because I definitely have a balance of like masculine, feminine energy. What the word that comes up from that description you guys are giving is submission. And here's the thing about submission. I think, especially for modern women, it can be very triggering. I actually love the word because, especially when it comes to sex, because sexually, I think it's like, you know, an opportunity to be submissive to me is very sexy because I actually think the submissive is usually the one who's more in power.
Right.
That's sexy too.
Right? But based on like what you're talking about.
Too. Because she's so sexy when I like being submissive too. You know, I don't do it very often, but she's so sexy when she's in her power, you know, and feeling that full feminine energy, and like you can just tell that she's feeling herself.
Yeah,
you know? and then I'm like, yeah, I like that. Keep doing that.
Right? I love it. But see, that's what I love, and I love that you guys are expressing this, you know, as a couple. I think a lot of times, especially in the single world, a lot of times the reason that we sort of fail at being able to connect intimately is because people are so afraid to be submissive. And sometimes it's the, you know, the man who has to submit. Sometimes it's the woman. If you're in a same-sex relationship, like there has to be that flow of a willingness to be submissive at some point, right?
Well, it's
but
interesting.
I feel like we're like,
yeah, you know, I wanted to kind of reframe that for some because you know that. I do agree. A lot of women, including myself, the idea of being submissive is a trigger for people, right? So when I was talking to Mia Cara, she was really talking about the idea of surrender rather than being submissive. And I think that's a whole different paradigm that you're stepping into. Because when you're surrendering yourself, you're being completely vulnerable. You're so safe with your partner that you can surrender your mind, your body, and your soul to that person. To me, there's something very romantic about that reframe as opposed to a submissive reframe. Now, a submissive reframe is all fun and kink, right? And it's all great in terms of the idea, right? But for me as a woman, I actually like to practice the art of surrendering because I'm always so tied up in work, in my practice and helping couples. And I'm always the one that's, you know, kind of managing the situation, the conversation, whatever it may be. So in my personal life, I think it's important to have moments of surrender, to have moments where I stop doing and I remain still, and my husband is able to be present with me in the way and kind of take ownership of the love that he has for me within himself, and be completely you know, on me or loving me in that way. So I would rather, you know, we can look at it from two perspectives. I think submissiveness or surrender.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that reframing. It does sound more romantic. It sounds more like, you know, Harlequin moment, like I like it.
Me too.
I had one thing that I was going to say for the experience that we had. So the submissive part, I would say it would probably be the other type of using rope, where it's more, I guess, like we were talking about before, a little bit more forceful and that kind stuff.
There's different ways to use
like
it.
BDSM, like actual, like
exactly.
Dominant,
the one she was teaching was more like the surrender.
Sensual.
It was the sensual. So I guess that's what I would say. The distinction would just be how you were using the rope and the connection at that time. It wasn't just like submissive and dominant, you know, tying ropes or anything like that.
Right.
So that was more like a different type of rope, which they're both great for whoever's, you know, wanting to try each one, you know, and they're very different. both very different, and people can have a really completely different experience from each one. So I think they should try both and see what really fits for them.
Yeah, because the biggest difference, Candace, is in the bondage aspect of it is it's more about the tie. It's more about the dominance. It's more about the polarity and the surrender. However, in the one that Mia Caro is teaching, because there are two different actual types of bondage styles and approaches. Hers is more about the men being in their masculine, but then they're actually doing sensual moves throughout, and then every once in a while giving a yank. It's like sensual and then a yank, and then sensual and then a yank, right? Yeah. So it's really building the momentum. Yeah. It's really building the intensity of the experience. So I would rather that experience for myself personally, but those are two different approaches,
They were talking about how the two different approaches didn't like being compared the same, like saying the sensual restraint and the BDSM, the people that bondage, or how they did that. They liked the distinctions between the two.
Yeah, because there's all different types.
We're obviously regular people that don't know, that haven't done it before, don't know that there's a difference.
Exactly.
From how people, just classify those things.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely.
So what are you thinking about all this?
I'm definitely hearing the distinction, which I think is cool. Yeah, and here's the thing. It's interesting that this is. I always think everything is perfect in conversation. So in wrapping up this whole summer of sexploration, I started out. The goal was to find that sort of crossover between how to connect intercourse and intimacy. So I think exactly what you're talking about is it. And I do think that this modality of, what is it? What is it?
The art of sensual restraint.
Sensual restraint. I do think that this is a modality that really speaks to, like, how do we go from just having intercourse with each other and
regular vanilla sex.
And having actual intimacy, like, I think that this is, because I'm a big believer. I do yoga and stuff like that. I'm a big believer that our transformation comes from our physical. Like, you can know it, you can think about it, you can process it in your mind a million times, but it's the physical things, it's the physicality and all of that I think drives it home. And so you're almost giving me what was the original question was, how do we marry sex and intimacy? And I think that's what you're
exactly, and that's why I loved it so much. I mean, think about it, from my perspective for a second. I teach communication and intimacy and safety and connection and communication, and to experience that as a practitioner and really get the full body experience of the relationship my husband and I share together in terms of our intimacy and connection was amazing. And she actually has people that hire her. She has regular women that date frequently, right? And she hired the women hire them to train their new boyfriends, which is really interesting to me.
It's amazing.
And also, of course, if you're married, you definitely want to hire her. Have her just fly her out,
No, it sounds amazing. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And I actually love the idea. And there's another modality, the orgasmic meditation, where it's very female-centered. Because I do think that there's something to be said for, like, the structure of having it, like, Paul, you were talking about the building of the atmosphere and things like that. It's just, that structure of being able to just really be in your biological sexuality. Like, we both have masculine and feminine energy, right? But there's something to be said about really being able to just be, like, biologically who you identify with, and fully masculine, and everything that goes along with that chemically and biologically. Right?
And fully feminine, Really.
Like, you get to come in and lay on blankets and furs. Like, that's... Go ahead, what were you going to say, Paul?
Oh, sorry about that. No, because we were talking about the environment. I forgot a couple things for the people that are listening. The other thing that she really had a big stickler thing for is no technology in the bedroom.
I like that.
You get rid of the technology. And we were all like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. No TVs,
no TVs, no nothing in the bedroom. And then also the temperature. Yeah. So when you're setting the temperature in your house, you want to make sure that the temperature is hot.
Okay.
So that way, the environment, the way that you're setting it up, you're not feeling cold or feeling closed. So if you set up the environment correctly, then you're both feeling warm, you're feeling open, and then you can start your experience.
Right.
Yeah,
and sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted to make sure that everybody that's going to try it has all the information that I learned.
Yeah, no, it's good. Absolutely. I hope everybody tries it. We have David is watching, and Penny. Penny says, I would totally love to have that intimacy in a relationship, right, Penny? You and me both. Lee says, it's great how each topic brings us back to communication and trust. And that's true. Lee has been with us through the whole summer, and it always comes back to communication and trust, right?
Yes, like, communication and trust all the time, yeah.
Yeah, so we have Gabriel watching, we have Julie. Hi, everybody. Hi, Lori.
Hi, everybody.
We have a lot of people who are watching and engaging, right? And hopefully they're going to want to try this. I can't wait to meet you.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Now, what's crazy? We're going to have to arrange, you guys will have to come back maybe in the fall in our New Beginnings series. But what's crazy is this hour always goes by so quickly.
It did.
Because at the top of it, I love this conversation, and there's more of these sort of I do have this whole list. I do want to try to touch on a few more of them though, right. And then also I want to give you Eva an opportunity to talk about your programs, and I know you have a little special gift for the audience.
Yeah.
But let's try to just get into a couple more of these. I mean, we sort of have wrapped up the idea that it comes down to intimacy and trust and all of that good stuff. Yeah. But I still think there's some of these that okay, we have C is for coupling. We know what that is. Like people who like to see other people with their partners. And
right.
D is for dominance. E is for electrostimulation. F is for foot fetishism. You guys know what that is. We're grown-ups. G is for gagging. H is for humiliation. I is for impact. I wanted to talk about, since we were already talking about sensual restraint, and we were doing the distinction between sensual restraint and bondage, there's also this thing called Japanese bondage, which is in the BDSM world, right? So separate that from the sensual restraints. And they also talk about that's typically done with rope, and they do binding and artwork.
Yes, it's an art form.
It's
actually an art form. It's very interesting to me. It's a little too much tying up for me in my yeah, but I mean it's like a whole day event from what I understand. Yeah. I mean it can be anyway. There's lots of videos and things on it. A couple of my couples actually practice it. And it's also a form of intimacy as well. And they have to have strong communication. And what I mean by that is if you have an insecure or anxious attachment with your partner, it's very difficult to get into any kind of sexual play like this. So the most important thing when you're going to go into sexual play is to make sure that you have a secure attachment to your partner, and there's complete safety in all regards, because otherwise there's little things that start to sever away at the relationship if that's not set in stone. And my understanding of that as a clinician is to have really good communication and be very clear about your needs, your wants, and desires. And if you can do that without criticizing, without getting defensive, without yelling or raising your voice, obviously, that would be the best outcome when it comes to experimenting with these types of things. And of course, people do it that are not in monogamous relationships as well, where it's more about the experience for them. But when I talk about it, I'm talking more for people that are in longer term relationships.
I got you. Yeah. So what you're saying, what I'm hearing, you can tell me if that's what you're saying.
Okay.
But that with the secure attachment, so creating the secure attachment. So I feel like a lot of times, we get into these relationships and we don't necessarily have that intention in mind. Like, we want it. I think it's something we want, even if we haven't clarified that that's what we want. So what is your advice for, getting to a foundation of secure attachment? Like, I know what I usually advise, and it's, purpose driven, all of that stuff, but I want to hear your take on how do you create secure attachment with someone that you're with, someone that you've been with for 20 years, someone that you've been with for 2 months. Like, what do you think, what's the first few steps of that?
Yeah. So you can do some intimacy things. So, creating more ritual and more ceremony in your life is part of creating intimacy in your relationship. Okay, so the first answer to that question is, number one, obviously you have to have really clear communication. And what I mean by that is, even when you have an argument, you want to make sure that you're not focusing on the content of what happened, but more about how you feel when something happened. A lot of times couples get caught up in the details and the content and I'm right, you're wrong type of dynamic, and it actually flushes intimacy right down the toilet bowl when you do that. You know, and it really causes a lot of distress in the relationship because you're really creating a little mini war between the two of you. It's like a Republican and a Democrat having a conversation. One's got another perspective. The other one has another perspective. And you know what? I don't want to sleep. Democrats and Republicans don't want to sleep together at the end of the night, you know?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that you really want to get outside of that right or wrong communication, number one.
Yes.
Okay. And have an emotion-focused communication. The next layer of that is building in little rituals and ceremonies that you do outside of the bedroom. Okay. So one of the ones that I do with my couples is every single Saturday, they do a sacred Saturday. And so what they do is they cook dinner, they go out, or they go to the beach. Like my husband and I, we actually do our sacred Saturday nights at the beach with the stars, you know, at nighttime. Aww. We love that. And I recommend you asking a couple different questions. Okay, so for the listeners, you guys can take this away, write it down on your iPhone or your notepad, whatever you got these days, right? Yes. The first question is, what are you celebrating this week, honey? Right? What are you grateful for this week? Start with those questions. And you can go as much into detail or as little into detail about those questions depending on how much you're celebrating and how much you're grateful for, right? I recommend at least having 2 or 3 things that you're celebrating or you're grateful for. The next question is, what are you struggling with this week? What are you feeling challenged with this week? And this is a great opportunity for couples to actually have the conversation about what they need, want, or desire more of moving forward for the following week. Because it's a weekly check-in. I have my couples do a weekly check-in. The last question is, how can I hold you accountable to your goal, or how can I support you in what you need, want, and desire this week is the last question. And so what I find is that it creates a container. It's a safe container. Couples are not, having that conversation on the heels of an argument or a disagreement. They're having it, when they're totally happy and in love, right? And it really creates a moment of connection. So more moments where you can have conversations like that have some depth, and you really want to be vulnerable in those exchanges. For example, not talking about people or what happened during your week, but how did you feel during your week? How did you feel regarding the struggle? How did you feel regarding the celebration, right? Because feelings are the universal language. When I say that I feel sad, you know what that feels like. Yeah. When I say I feel angry, when I say I feel desirable, when I say I feel happy, you know what that experience feels like, because human beings have all experienced the emotional capacity, but our ideas are not always like that. So we can disagree about ideas, but we can't disagree about how someone feels. So that would be a couple of my recommendations. What are your thoughts about that, Candace?
Well, I always say, I'm a big believer in, that our partnerships are really about our purpose as opposed to our purpose being for our partnerships. So I always think that even if it's a friendship, when it comes to developing secure attachment, I totally am in accord with you about talking about your feelings and being really authentic.
Yes.
Like really authentic about what you feel and not being afraid to, actually, I don't want to say not being afraid, because sometimes you'll be afraid and you still have,
yes.
Like if you want to connect, you still have to do it, right?
Right, exactly.
Just say what is so. And, I think that the way to, and I also loved what you said about rights and wrongs, taking out right and wrong out of the conversation, that there is some supposed to be. Like, this is the way, we've known each other for this long, so it's supposed to be this way. Right. Or, there's some rule for how we're supposed to be behaving with each other. Like, right. I think it's important to, look at how we can just be present in the moment and open to how we show up for each other. right? And in an accepting way. I think acceptance, and I always like self-acceptance is sort of the baseline of what I teach. It's like everything I teach is a Trojan horse for self-acceptance, because I feel like when we accept ourselves, we can accept other people, right?
That's right.
Absolutely, you can.
Yeah, it's your own mirror projection. Clinically, we call that projection. If you have insecurities, if you have shame, if you have guilt, if you have sexual blocks that you haven't worked through, what's going to happen is you're going to project that onto your partner, and then your partner is going to start to internalize that as shame or not being good enough for you, because if you're hiding from your partner, you know what, that's going to translate very negatively to your partner in terms of intimacy, in terms of trust.
Absolutely.
And what I mean by hiding is not necessarily wearing clothes when you're having sex. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being fully naked with your partner, being fully present, but being fully naked on an emotional level is a totally different experience. And then you can get into the spiritual realm. Yeah. And the spiritual realm moves you into a whole different place of evolution in terms of your sexuality. And I encourage couples to play in all playgrounds, because all of them, emotional, physical, spiritual, when it comes to sexuality, play a role in the enjoyment, in the intensity, and the polarity that's being built within that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's fantastic, Dr. Eva.
I get to listen to that every night.
That's awesome, Paul. You're a good guy. So the two of you, I absolutely love you. I'm so glad that you came on the show. Dr. Eva, I want you to be able to talk about your program and talk about those of you who are, let me tell the people that are listening, if you're loving the show and you love what we talked about, don't forget to hit the like and hit the loves. Give us lots of hearts and smiles and all that stuff. But Dr. Eva, talk about your program and the special gift that you have for the peeps.
Yeah, so we're really excited because we just launched our Master Communication and Intimacy e-course program. Last month, we launched it worldwide in Canada, Australia, South America, and the United States. So we're really excited about it because it's taken us 10 whole months to develop. And basically what it does is it actually helps couples learn how to communicate and build intimacy. Because the thing is that our parents, society, like we've been talking about today, they don't teach us how to maintain intimacy. They don't teach us how to maintain intimacy through communication, because it's a whole different type of communication process than the type of communication process that we see the society have. For example, the judicial system is all about right and wrong. Our teachers, our academics is all about right and wrong. The government is all about right or wrong. So we're really coming down from the polarity, or the paradigm rather, of right and wrong from the top of society down. Right? So it's trickling down, and couples are not realizing they're actually in a political platform type of stance in their communication.
Dr. Eva, I gotta tell you, we only got 1 minute left, so you gotta make sure you tell the audio people. The audio people are gonna go. We'll still have the video people, so hurry up and tell the audio people how they can get to this program. And then you can tell more.
Yeah, so go to relationshiprevolutionaries.com and you can put in Thrive with Candy as the code, and you can get it for $498. The value of the course is $5,000, just so you know. We usually sell it for $1,798.88, and we're giving it away to you guys for $498 because we want you guys to thrive. It's amazing. It's a great program.
That's awesome.
Fully comprehensive. Yeah.
That's awesome. And for all the people in Armed Radio, until next time, never forget you are a love machine. If you ever start to feel like you aren't getting the love you need, just make more and then ask for candy. So our Armed Radio, right? Yay. Thank you, Dr. Eva. Don't go anywhere yet because the video people are still on. Dr. Eva and Paul. And I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about give the end of the program and, a little more explanation for our video people. But thank you, Armed Radio peeps. Love you. Thank you for being here and always listening. We love you, and we'll see you. Or we won't see you, but you'll hear us next Monday.